Good evening and welcome to our Jigsaw webinar for parents, facilitated by Jigsaw clinicians. Before we get started, I'll go through a few guidelines. You'll need headphones, earphones, or a quiet space. Please close all other applications running in the background of your computer. If you experience any problems with sound or vision, please check your internet connection. However, if you continue to experience difficulties through the webinar, please contact us on elearning@jigsaw.ie or ask a question to our moderator. During the webinar, we would encourage you to ask questions via the control panel. These will be directed to the facilitator and answered at the end of the session. Please note that we cannot hear or see you during the webinar unless you have agreed to become a panelist for the webinar. So how do I ask a question? On your screen, you will see a control panel. You can ask a question at any time through this control panel. After typing your question, press send or the enter key. You can also expand this control panel to full screen mode. Other attendees at the webinar will not see your questions. At the end of the session, please give us your feedback by answering the post-webinar survey. We hope you enjoy the webinar.
Hi everyone. My name's Laura. I'm the clinical manager with Jigsaw and Jigsaw Donegal in particular, and my colleague Jules is here as well.
I'm the clinical manager in North Bengal.
Yeah, and we're just here today to talk a little bit around navigating family conflict or challenging communications at home. So we're going to do a little presentation for the first wee while. Oh, we also have Catherine as well offering sign language. Catherine would like to say hello there. And you can view the three of us on your page, or you can view one of us and the presentation, but you should be fit to see three of us and the presentation. So we should be about 20 minutes going through stuff, and please guys, everyone, if you have questions that maybe you would like answered, or we can talk through at the end, so we have some time at the end for answering questions with myself and Jules. And yeah, I think we'll kick off. So the first piece that we kind of were asking was for you to think in mind, how did you deal or manage with conflict as a young person? When you were younger or when you were living at home with family members, how did you manage this? How did you approach it? What was your responses to it? And just maybe have a little think or write down a few words. And if there's something really springing to mind, or it can be a reminder maybe of what some of the experiences your young person might be having too. And just think about that as we go through the webinar as well. It might help understanding and relating to the topic that we're discussing. So I'm going to hand you over to Jules, who's going to take you through a little bit more.
Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome. So I suppose when we decided to do the webinar around managing family conflict, I suppose what sprung to my mind was looking at the young person and all of the developments that they're trying to navigate at a very young age. So I wanted to include Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages theory. So it's not going to be too heavy on the theory, so don't worry. But I suppose when we're looking at these two stages, specifically adolescence, the young person is about kind of going through adolescence around the ages of 12 to 18. And I suppose for every young person, they're trying to grapple with a lot of changes that are happening. Obviously, there's physical changes in their development, there's hormonal changes, there's development of their kind of psychological well-being and their emotional well-being. And for a young person aged between 12 and 18, they're very difficult, I suppose, developments and kind of maturation that they're trying to I suppose navigate through, and it can be really, really difficult for them. So a lot of the time in Jigsaw, we'd hear parents kind of say to us, you know, when my young person was 12, they were happy-go-lucky, didn't have a care in the world. They hit 13 and it all went to pot. You know, there was mood swings, kind of, you know, didn't want to speak to their parents, all that kind of stuff, and kind of don't recognize the young person. And I suppose that's because the young person is going through these huge kind of changes. And I suppose what Erik Erikson says on the next slide is that the main task of adolescence is, I suppose, for the young person to kind of form a sense of identity, to understand who he or she is. And I suppose they do this, I suppose, you know, obviously the family and their parents exert a huge influence on the young person, but they're also being influenced by, you know, school classmates, school friends. There's also kind of societal norms that they're trying to adhere to, and there's also popular culture can have an impact on the young person in them forming their sense of self. You know, if a young person kind of is interested in rock music, they may begin to dress like their favorite artist or that kind of thing. So a young person is really trying to find who I am in the world, and where do I fit in, and where's my belonging. So Erik Erikson will kind of say, you know, young people who kind of, I suppose, receive proper encouragement and reinforcement, you know, and are kind of able to do that kind of personal exploration, they'll kind of form a strong sense of self and a feeling of independence and control. And he says for other young people maybe who don't receive that kind of encouragement, or don't kind of move through this this kind of model, that, you know, they'll be confused, maybe won't have their own sense of identity. But I suppose just for parents not to be worried that, you know, it says 12 to 18 years, but I would feel that gaining your own sense of self and your own identity is a lifelong process. So don't be worried if your young person is 18 and kind of still doesn't know who they are or what they want to be. We would often say to young people who come to Jigsaw that if they don't find their tribe in school, they'll definitely find it in college. And so don't be worried about your young person if they're still kind of confused and not too sure about their own identity. So the next stage that I'm going to go through kind of ranges from the ages of kind of 18 to 30 plus. And so this is kind of what Erik Erikson would say, intimacy versus isolation. So it's about exploring relationships and moving to commitment and long-term relationships. So he kind of said that I suppose it's vital to develop close and committed relationships with other people. And as we enter that kind of adulthood stage, that these emotional, intimate relationships play a critical role in our own emotional well-being. So he would describe intimate relationships as those characterized by closeness, honesty, and love. And it's about kind of, I suppose, if you succeed through this stage, and not that anybody would fail through this stage, but it's just, it's easier for you to kind of develop close bonds if you have the ability to kind of trust in other people, and, you know, have maybe had positive relationships in the past and good, stable, kind of supportive family. So he kind of says people who navigate this period of life successfully are able to forge fulfilling relationships with the people, whereas for other young people maybe who don't navigate through this very well might feel isolated in some ways. But that can always be worked on. That feeling of isolation is something that a lot of young people come to Jigsaw would experience, especially during COVID, that kind of sense of being on your own a lot. So it's nothing to be worried about if your young person is feeling isolated. So I suppose if we're looking at those kind of psychosocial stages and looking at the kind of theory, how does that relate to kind of family conflict, or how is that even relevant to family conflict? So I suppose a way of explaining this would be kind of that, you know, when young people are kind of trying to find their own identity, they tend to kind of move away a little bit from the family. So they kind of tend to spend a lot of time with their kind of peers, their friends, and sometimes the family can feel almost slightly rejected by this. But it's just the young people trying to, I suppose, find their sense of self and find a group that they belong to, which is a really, really crucial part. And even in the My World survey too, that Jigsaw spearheaded, a lot of young people would have said that their family or their friends are almost as important, if not more important, than their family. So their friends are like a second family to young people. And I suppose it's about trying to, I suppose, help a young person to meet them where they're at in their development, and to know that they're trying to navigate through a lot of different changes, you know, in their body, on a cognitive level, on an emotional level, and just, I suppose, to give them space and time to kind of find themselves, and they may be kind of moody now and then, but they will finally come back to the family fold and will become like a fully formed young person. Just not to be too worried about them, that they're just trying to, I suppose, find themselves almost.
Yeah, there's something in them developing their independence in that stage, and that sort of pull and push about needing support, and then they're looking to develop their own independence as well, Jules. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I was gonna move on. Oh, sorry. Are we good there, Jules?
Yeah, I said that all. Yeah, that's grand.
Yeah. Sorry. So I am kind of thinking about how do we communicate with our young people, and I pulled this example based on my own brother when he was growing up as a teenager, and a regular argument in our house on a Friday. His job was to take the bins out, and I was thinking about how the different types of communication. So there's 4 different styles of communication, and one would be the ideal, what we'd hope to achieve all the time, but that idea of clear and direct communication. As Jill talks about, when some young people are in the developmental stage, sometimes they maybe won't be able to understand any indirect or mass communication, and to be quite direct and make things simple. So one way, if it was you asked so your young person or to take the bins out and they didn't do it, maybe when you come back from the shops or work or whatever, one way of approaching that would be clear and direct communication. So I am disappointed that you forgot to take out the bins, as I have asked without being reminded. So you're kind of you're stating how you feel, which is something you hold as a parent, and the reason why, and it's direct. It's about the situation. Another way, which would be sort of masked yet direct communication. So, John, son, people just don't work as hard at home as they used to. So that's masked, but it's direct because it's towards him, the young person, but it's masked in how it's been said in a very in a masked sort of way. So clear and indirect communication would be, it's clear with the message that there's disappointment there about maybe not doing, but the indirect is sort of the broad generalization that a young person will be fit to maybe understand that it's directed at them, and find the message in that, or then be fit to resolve it, or maybe feel that they're on the back foot and sometimes can change their approach to that. And the last one would be masked and indirect communication. So that would really be a large generalization. So the you today are really, oftentimes that will fly right over someone's head and maybe understand it because it's not directed at them. It's not about the actual issue. It's a generalization on people in general. So it's so important to think about how do you communicate when there is something happening, or something hasn't been done, or there's an element of where there could be conflict. How do you communicate within that? And just bear that in mind, those different types. And it's good to use statements with I, use your feelings, and state that what is the thing that maybe isn't working and isn't helping or is wrong. So we were thinking about what would be the steps to generally build effective family communication. What would be there before anything would become whether would be conflict. And so it's important to remember conflict is always going to be there. It is healthy, and it's in a safe place when it's at home, where young people can learn how to manage and communicate during conflicting times. Because as they grow into adulthood and they do gain that independence, they're going to have to navigate that in the outside world. So it's really knowing that it's not bad, it's something that happens, but it's how we go about it and how we role model for our young people. So in building effective communication, it'd be important to communicate frequently and try and have times. I know it's very hard and everyone's very busy, but regularly. Maybe it's dinner times or times. Maybe there's, if everyone's working at home or in school or at home or homeschooling, that they maybe have points in the day where you communicate and it's phone free or tablet free or laptop free, to have those conversations. And like previously mentioned, that being clear and direct, very much stating what the issue is, and being very direct about it. The next bit would be sort of being an active listener, and that's really how young people know that you care, and it's showing respect. So listening to what they have to say, and good ways of showing how, you know, active listening would be reflecting back what they've said to you, or asking questions and taking an interest in what they've said maybe the night before or in the morning, and coming back to it. Be honest and open. You're human first before you're a parent or a teacher or a sibling. It's important to know that you have to be honest with yourself and open, and using I statements and how you are perceiving what is happening. Thinking about the person who you're communicating with, how do they, what you're learning about how they communicate. Is there a time of day where they're better? Is there a place where they're better at doing it? How are they kind of, when they maybe come home from school, is that always the right time to address an issue? Paying attention to non-verbals, they tell a lot, our own non-verbals as well as our young people's, and just being very attentive to them, because it can tell a lot, and it can help escalate a situation or de-escalate a particular conflict. The next bit is around, and it's what sort of reinforcing what Jules was saying earlier on around that being positive and focusing on the family strengths, the good things that's happened, the positives that a young person or the family achievements, and that reinforces their sense of confidence and how they are, and bolsters self-esteem, which is super important for good mental health and overall well-being. And lastly, thinking about role modeling. How do you manage conflict with others? How do you role model to your young person how to deal with conflictual situations, and just being aware of your own processes, and how a young person might be learning off that as well. So in preparation, so we've sort of broke this down into the general in preparation when conflict happens, and then managing if there's anger. So sort of revisiting what we've kind of spoke about, but in preparation, it's trying to be flexible with smaller issues. So maybe given maybe not taking on certain things that are little ones, because it gives you a little bit more with your young person to engage and listen with the bigger stuff that might happen. Go easy on yourself. You're human first, you're human too, and it's okay to overreact. Sometimes it happens, but it's around that role modeling and saying sorry and starting again, and working through it as well.
I do know sometimes it
Good
can be
thing
very
might be,
difficult to say you're sorry, or to kind of experience kind of like I was wrong in that sense and I shouldn't have done that. But for a young person, it can also be an opener for them to kind of go, okay, well, I appreciate that you were able to kind of identify that maybe what you said wasn't correct, or wasn't what happened. And sometimes that can be really useful to kind of, I suppose, dissipate the family conflict, so you can kind of have a laugh about it and say, look, you know, I get things wrong too. You know, so sorry to jump in there, Laura, but I just, yeah, I've experienced that myself.
no, you're right. Yeah, sorry, I'm moving over because my internet isn't great apparently. But yeah, that saying sorry is really challenging to say, but it means so much to young people, that role modeling, and they can get a lot from that, and can really help them, particularly in other situations outside of the home, as well, like in school, when people they understand a bit more around how adults process stuff too, or older adults. That idea of preparation, preparing what you're going to say, and how and where and what time of day, and are there others present? Are you going to be on your own? Are you going to be in a car? Are you going to be out for a walk, or where and how are you going to do it? And self-care is minding your own mental health and well-being in order to be in the best place to support others. So what is going on for yourself and minding yourself, and maybe it's not the right day for you to address, or time for you to address something, or maybe delegating that to somebody else. Okay, so communicating through times of conflict, that they're inevitable, they come. The key piece is staying calm, stop what you're doing, make eye contact. So this is all about your non-verbals, and make that eye contact with the young person, and listen and show respect. I suppose one of the pieces is seek to understand first. So that listening and try to understand the young person's perspective or their side of things, and then show, and that's a sign of respect, and then seek to be understood. So to speak and try to get your young people to understand where you're coming from. Let them have their say and voice their opinion. Again, be open about your feelings. So how are you feeling? And explain it in that simple and very clear language about your concern. What is it for you? Be open to compromise, negotiate with young people, or your young person. Think about what you're willing to negotiate and compromise in. It might be a situation where there is none, and you have to say no, but that's I suppose it's doing that in a calm and respectful manner. And change the term rules, because it can come across as quite dictatorial maybe to young people, to agreements. So that collaborative, that you have worked this out together, and this is the agreement that you have come upon. And if, for example, that agreement is broke, what might be the what's the word? What is the what's the word, James? Consequence is the word.
Yeah.
For that.
But I suppose young people love compromise. You know, because they feel that they're getting something in return. I'm like, you know, if you compromise with your mom or your dad, how would that be? You know, and I'm like, they may let you go to the disco if you actually give up your phone for 2 hours, you know, every evening, or whatever that might be. And young people don't like me very much when I'm like, put up the agreement up on the fridge so everybody can see it, you know, and you can relate back to it. They're like, I really don't want to do that. And I'm like, but it's great, it worked for you. But I suppose a lot of the time, you know, if you can be calm and respectful, I know it's really, really difficult when a young person is pushing your buttons. But if you can kind of take a couple of deep breaths and just, you know, just try and calm yourself a little bit, it can be really helpful. I know it's very difficult, but you know, if you respond in a way that's kind of not aggressive, but kind of like you're losing your cool, it tends to happen that they will model that back to you. You know, so it can be very difficult, but it can be really helpful, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And there's certain things that you just have to say no, maybe for their safety, and it's really in the explaining that you know, if it's to have to be home a certain time at night, that I feel worried when you don't come home before a particular time, or I need to know where you're going, so that I'm feeling safe and happy as to where you are, and that you're safe. Okay. The next one, hold on now. And this is sort of the next part, is around managing anger through time conflicts with actual anger, at least when things sort of escalate. Stay calm as much as you can. Take a breath and let a break and a breath, and let things cool down if needed. So maybe walking away for a few minutes, or an hour or whatever, to try and let things diffuse, so you can both come into your window tolerance to be able to communicate, and it takes the adrenaline out of it as well. Just take that little break. Then always return to it. Don't leave it open. It's important to come back to it at some stage or some time, and showing that active listening, and that you care about their thoughts and feelings. But maybe maybe you're not taking how maybe they spoke to you or behaving around you, and explaining how that made you feel. Stick to the issue and not bring up past events or disagreements. That can be hard in the heat of the moment.
I'm sure
looking
you've
at what has been
experienced
the
that,
problem
Laura.
in that's caused that particular argument, and dealing with that piece to any other.
Yeah, I'm sure you know, Laura, from sessions and stuff like that, when young people are like, you know, when young people are like, oh, you know, we had this argument, and then she brought up that thing that happened 6 months ago, you know, and that really got on my goat, you know, because I would even know when I was young, my parents, you know, if I was in trouble for something, they'd be like, and that thing you did half a year ago, and I'm like, oh my God, just let it go. I think, like what Laura's saying, is stick to the issue at hand. Because if you start rehashing the past, the young person just stops listening. They're like, listen, you know, I'm not talking about that event that happened 2 or 3 months ago. You know, we're talking about this situation at the moment. And I know it can be really difficult, because you can kind of say, you know, in the past I let you do X, Y, and Z, and that's what happened. You know, so this time I'm not going to let you do that. Instead of saying to the young person, well, look, you know, we've talked about that in the past, but now today we're going to focus on this issue, you know, at hand. And I know it can be really difficult, but like what Laura's saying there, it's much more effective.
Yeah, it is, because all the young person hears is what you've said about the thing months ago, the issue may be at hand. Yeah, okay. Once you've listened to them, so some steps we were kind of thinking about was just, again, that idea, listen to them, try to understand their perspective, then seek to be understood. So take time to express your thoughts and feelings as best you can in that clear, simple, short, very direct way, and maybe negotiate if possible on something you can agree on, or at least be clear on why you don't agree. So it's that idea of assertiveness that sometimes there isn't a medium met, sometimes we'll never agree, but seek to maybe understand each other's position as well. Yes, okay. So this lastly is around aggressive behaviour, and sometimes this does.
Yeah. So don't be worried about asking questions.
And we just sort of wanted to touch on it briefly. It's not a common occurrence.
Yeah. So just if anybody has any questions, be sure to post them up there. Because we're open for questions after this. You know, and obviously, you know, if you have kind of, you know, trying to use any kind of young person's name or whatever, but you know, we're open for questions and we'll answer them if we can. And so just around aggressive behavior. So this is something that you know, a lot of parents would kind of ring into Jigsaw and kind of say, look, my young person, they're becoming very aggressive, I'm not sure what to do. So, you know, it is a common occurrence. So don't be too worried if your young person is displaying kind of a little bit of aggression, you know, because I suppose with COVID and that kind of isolation and everything being so uncertain, that young people are finding it really, really difficult to manage, as are parents. So I suppose a way to manage kind of aggressive behaviour is to have clear boundaries and clear messaging that behaviour is not okay. So to kind of say, look, that behaviour and that aggression is not okay to display, you know, in front of your mom or dad or whoever it might be, or your partner, you know, to kind of just say, look, you know, we don't respond to that kind of aggressive kind of behaviour. So explain to the young person that you won't speak about the issue when the young person is kind of presenting in that aggressive way. So just say, look, we're not going to talk about this now because you seem very kind of head up about it, and maybe you just need to kind of take a couple of moments and calm down, and, you know, come back when you're in a space that might be less aggressive or you're a bit more calm. And say, you know, we're open and we're always willing to speak to you about any situation or anything that's going on for you, but you need to come in a kind of a calm manner so that we can talk about it, you know, clearly and directly, like what Laura was saying, and create that space to do so, to work things out. So I think sometimes with a young person, you know, you're not trying to be authoritarian or kind of, you know, but to say to the young person that they need to be clear on the consequences for that kind of behavior. And once you have consequences in place, the most important part of that is to be consistent. If you say, this is the consequence for talking to me or your dad like that, you know, is that you don't get your phone for 2 hours, and you don't follow through, the young person is like, well, I can talk to my mom and dad any way I want, because they never kind of follow through on the consequences. So being consistent is really, really important, that you would actually follow through on the action. You know, and make sure of your own behavior is respectful, like what Laura was saying earlier, that we are modeling for our young people how to kind of communicate with other people. And if we're kind of behaving in a way that's kind of aggressive or even passive aggressive, the young person is going to respond with that, because that's how they've learned to communicate. So if you can kind of say, you know, that, you know, I'm calm and I'm willing to talk, but you need to model and you need to mirror how I am and be calm too, you know, because we're not going to get anywhere if you're shouting and screaming the house down. And especially for other siblings who might be in the house, that they're kind of learning, okay, well, that's how I communicate with my mom and dad. But I suppose you're not alone there. A lot of young people are kind of displaying some of that kind of aggressive behavior. You know, so not to be too worried that, you know, it can be worked on. And just, I suppose, model to the young person how you would prefer to be spoken to. And obviously just, you know, we're open and here for questions if you have any.
I suppose with a lot of the anger and aggression is around, there might be other things going on for that young person, and maybe there's something happening in school or elsewhere, and it might be they're getting really agitated about something small. So it's really feeding off the non-verbals and trying to understand why that might be too. Often we get referrals for young people for anger, and it's often something that very different that they come in after a bit of time that they need support with.
So I have a question here for you, Laura. So a parent just asked, look, what if the young person who is dragging up past mistakes, so what if it's the young person and kind of throwing them in the parent's face? So if the young person is actually dragging up past mistakes that the parents have made, how would you manage that?
I suppose you'd be thinking about returning to the issue at hand and bringing that young person back, so facilitating them to talk about the actual issue, and whatever that is at hand, and trying not to get caught up in those previous things. But maybe there's something to be revisited at a different time with the young person, or as a family, or whatever the case may be, but that the single issue is, and explaining that from your perspective as to why you might want to deal with and work one particular thing that's current and active, and the old stuff. I suppose it's important to hear them and listen to why and how they keep bringing that up, what is that's not solved or resolved for them as well, but maybe looking at a different time or place to do that.
Yeah, it can be very difficult, you know. We can both throw mud as good as each other, but yeah, to kind of, you're right, Laura, to kind of say, look, you know, I hear you, and I know that's important, and maybe we could talk about that at a different time.
Yeah, definitely. So I have one for you, Jules. Oh, it's gone. Oh, wait. My child throws items around the house in a tantrum, very angry, siblings get frightened. What can I do?
I suppose if a young person is kind of, I suppose, displaying their communication in that kind of physical way, I suppose the young person is trying to communicate something with the parent, you know, but they're using their behavior because maybe they don't have language to do that. So sometimes what can be helpful is to say to the young person, look, I know that you seem really distressed and very upset. I understand that you want to let this kind of, these feelings, you know, come out or whatever, and to say to the young person, look, maybe we could try, and maybe if you could even use words, so like they don't have to use sentences, but like to say to the young person, are you sad, or is it more of a frustration that you're feeling, or kind of where on a scale of 1 to 10 do you feel angry? Is it 9? Okay, how might we bring that back to 6? And to try and get the young person to even sort of try and develop that language around emotions. And because a lot of young people come to Jigsaw say, I don't know, I don't have the language, I don't know how to say that to my parents. So they use their behaviour to kind of communicate what they're experiencing. So I understand that this young person's siblings are being very distressed by it. To try and get the young person to just kind of sit down and say, look, you know, let's kind of look at your feelings, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. How sad are you? How unhappy are you? How, you know, to get the young person to use even a scale sometimes can be easier for them to use those words and get you to kind of understand where they're at and what's going on for them. So that was helpful. I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
how to stop a teenager bringing both parents into an argument that the whole family are involved in, like a control issue? So how do we stop and it just kind of escalates? So how to stop a teenager bringing both parents into an argument or the whole family into an argument?
Okay. Tricky one. I suppose one of the main pieces would be the partner and the two parents sort of having a united front and communicating and maintaining their own cool, and minding themselves and how they are and what behaviour and how they're communicating with this young person, and maybe trying to around the rest of the family, so that they don't escalate, and that they have, I suppose, they're looking after themselves as well, and that they know, your siblings know when to, maybe they need to step away and look after themselves. Maybe that's a talking to them individually outside of that, and how are they when these things happen in the home, and then in terms of the young person maybe creating some of this challenge within the home, is speaking to them again about the feelings and trying to understand how come they are doing this, and how come maybe they're bringing their siblings in and bringing everyone within the house. And again, it's that focus on the current issue. What is this going on right now for us? And where is what's going on for that young person that they feel they need to bring other people and solve it as well? And what would it be like to work together to solve it, just the two of you as well? So that could be something that's done outside of the actual conflict area. It might be a reflection on a later date or later time, as well. You know, if you've anything more to that, Jules?
Yeah, I suppose that can happen a lot, you know, where they try and involve the other family and get everybody kind of hyped up and angry at each other or whatever. But like Laura was saying, to ask the siblings to step out, a lot of the time in the family dynamic or the family system, there's always a young person who's kind of the peacemaker, who wants to make sure everybody's really happy, and sometimes get involved in those conflicts. But say to the young person, this is between, you know, your brother or your sister and mom and dad or mom and partner or whoever it might be. And to kind of say to siblings and the rest of the family, look, you know, we're going to go to a separate room and kind of talk this through in a really calm manner, and we don't need any help with it. Yeah, and maybe what Laura was saying, maybe bring it somewhere else, maybe go out for a walk with a young person and say, look, I don't want to do this in the home, you know, because everybody gets involved and we can't hear you properly, and we really want to try and understand what's going on for you. I don't know. It's kind of the same as Laura said.
Yeah, it's that environment as well. Where is this happening? Is it something that can be taken out of the home, or done at a different time, as well, so that it isn't impacting everybody else? And also creating that family time where it's that young person is included then afterwards. It's not always the case where maybe they maybe feel like they're creating difficulties, and they can become quite isolated within the family. So it's really that working to have times of communication, dinner times, touch times, maybe movie nights, different things where everybody feels part of it and everybody can can live together harmoniously at different points as well.
Yeah, I'm going to take the next one here, Laura, if you don't mind. Yes, I'm dealing with this at the moment. So how do you deal with a child with jealousy towards a younger sibling? So I'm actually going through this at the moment. So I suppose I just wanted to answer what we've decided to do, or what you can do is, I suppose, what myself and my husband have decided to do is that we're each going to spend individual time with each of our children. So I'm going to spend time with my eldest son one Saturday, and then I'm going to spend extra time with my younger son on a Sunday, and we're going to do it vice versa, so that the young person actually gets time to themselves with each of the parents, because I suppose that jealousy is only normal, and if a young person feels that they're kind of, that the younger sibling took some of their attention, if they were an only child for a significant amount of time like mine were, that they feel they don't kind of understand that, like, what is happening here and why is this happening. So I think sometimes if you can kind of say, look, your brother, your sister is much younger, they don't understand, you're really smart and you understand a lot, so that's why mom and dad are trying to get you to kind of cut your younger sibling a bit of slack, because they're not at the level that you're at, and I suppose just to spend that kind of time with each of your children, kind of independent of the other, and then do things together as a family. But it is something that young children will grow out of. It's just, it can be quite hard at times that you're, you know what I mean, especially if there's aggression involved, that can be really, really difficult to manage. So I just wanted to answer that one.
You did very well, yeah. Lived experience.
Yeah, I have one for you, Laura, if you want.
Okay.
So, where do you draw the line in an argument if the child becomes violent?
Okay, I think it's once it happens, is sort of trying to find a place of calm initially, and try to diffuse those emotions. That automatic nervous system is being activated, and how do you soothe that and trying to re-regulate them initially. And that might be from walking away, it might be thinking about what calms them and how do you support them in this intense emotion in the moment initially, and showing it compassion and trying to understand it. But again, it's that returning to what is acceptable and what is not within your home, and that might come in a later time. And I suppose an immediate thing is trying to work with what is going on for them right now, and how do we bring them back in to being able to focus on some logic as emotion, and be able to communicate effectively. Because really, when they're in that heightened angry state, they're not they're not maybe logically thinking. Any of us who are over anxious or over angry, and we're not thinking clearly. So it's really about how do we bring them down. What do you know calms them? So if going for a walk helps them, or if watching Netflix, or supporting them, I don't know, some people get a shower or doing their makeup or whatever to help them relax, and that self-care, or breathing techniques if things are particularly bad, is sort of trying to get them grounded again. And doing certain, we've lots of different breathing techniques if you look through the website, through Jigsaw. But even just that, getting more oxygen and controlled into themselves and yourself as well. And sometimes it does take a little bit of walking away, and adults or young adults and teenagers often know how to regulate themselves. It's giving them an opportunity to do that. But the key piece would be returning to it then at a later time, to try and feel that they feel listened to at a time when they're able to communicate it appropriately, and the same for yourself, that you're in that place, that you're maybe, if someone's angry or aggressive with you, you're going to be heightened and more anxious and more adrenaline, so that you're fit to communicate effectively as well. Hope I did that one all right.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Very difficult. Jules, I have one for you. So I am a single mother and I have a 13-year-old who acts as a daddy figure to my 11-year-old who throws temper tantrums when he doesn't get what he wants. The word no is a trigger for him. The older one will not leave the room and let me deal with it. What do you recommend in this scenario?
Well, I suppose I'd probably talk to your 13-year-old's child just you know, before anything kind of kicks off, just on a general level, even kind of if you're bringing him home from school in the car or whatever it might be, and just kind of say to him, you know, like that, I know sometimes you feel that, you know, you kind of have to stand up for mom or kind of, you know, because you're the eldest in the house, be the man in the house, but that's not your role here. You know, you're my son first and foremost. You're only 13, you know, and if your brother does kick off that, you know, mom can deal with it, mom can handle it, and you know what I mean, and say, look, I don't want you to feel responsible for your younger brother. Just say, you know, you're my child, you're only 13, you should be doing what other 13-year-olds are doing and not kind of trying to be dad or trying to help me, and say, you know, mom can manage. It can be difficult sometimes for mom, but mom can manage. So don't be too worried about me. And just try and get to speak to your 13-year-old son just when nothing is going on in the house, just to actually have that conversation and explain to him his role in the family and that he is your son and he is a child and he's only 13, and that it's not his job to kind of protect mom, and that it's a really lovely way that he feels so close to mom and that he wants to protect her, and that's fine. But, you know, in relation to his brother, that mom can manage and she's going to manage that herself. Thank him for his help, but that he needs to be a 13-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Don't think I have any more.
No.
No other question.
I have one for you, Laura, if you want. So there's one here. I have a 22-year-old.
What's that?
Sorry, I have a question here for you if you want to take it. So it says, I have a 22-year-old who loses it with myself and my husband and is pretty verbally abusive. I try to stay calm, and if I get so upset and Dad asks her to leave the room, she refuses and just shouts even more. What would you advise? Do you want me to repeat that? Will I repeat that?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I have a 22-year-old who loses it with myself and my husband and is pretty verbally abusive. I try to stay calm, and if I get so upset, Dad will ask her to leave the room. She will refuse and she just shouts even more. What would you advise?
Okay. Difficult, particularly when the person is older in the home, and it can get, it's very difficult. I think the main piece would be look after yourself, and that's self-care in other periods of time, and looking after where you are. The next piece would be, I suppose, trying to diffuse some of this anger and trying to discuss and maybe trying to understand where it comes from at a time when nothing else is happening. But also setting boundaries. If she's living in your home and you have maybe it's setting up agreements and setting rules, but there's certain boundaries within your home and explaining those to her, and if there's consequences there, and it's really our role modeling. And you trying your best to keep calm, and maybe it is the case where you have to step out as well if things are getting too much that it's not acceptable. Okay, and working with your husband on that as well, and how you communicate to her, but definitely the times when things are calm, returning to that and explain how it makes you feel. Why do you feel in that moment when someone's being shouting or aggressive, and try and her understand it from your perspective as well, because maybe she's not seeing that, and then equally try to understand it from her perspective as well. Challenging.
So I think, like what you were saying earlier, Laura, you know, to be that united front, mom and dad together, to kind of say, look, you know, mom and dad aren't going to, you know, stick around for you to be shouting or whatever, and we're going to leave the room now, and once you calm down, we're willing to come back in and communicate. But once you're like this, both mom and dad are going to leave the room, you know, and take some time out for ourselves, because we don't want to respond to you in a verbally abusive way, because that's not how we operate and that's not how we communicate. So we're going to actually leave the room now, and when you calm down, come back to us.
Yeah, no, definitely it's that returning to it and talking it out then as well. But it's something so distressing for you that you don't have to sit with that and not walking away, but together will support and reinforce what's happening, because it's not okay to do that out in school or college or anywhere else. It's equally not okay to do that with your loved ones as well. But it's maybe the role is different in teaching and supporting young people with that. Okay, I don't think we've any more. I suppose it's something it's just been aware from over the past 9 months that's been coming into the office, James, around it's been challenging for families, it's been intense, and cut yourselves some slack and be kind to yourselves, because this is being abnormal, or whatever normal is now, but it's been a real challenge and everybody's dealing with it differently, and we've all had moments where we've become something we didn't know we could be, and we learn from them. So be kind would be my thing to yourselves, when you're doing your best and you've had to take on a variety of different roles and not your choice, and done a good job of it.
It's lovely to spend lots of time with your family, you know, during lockdown and that kind of thing, but also it can be really quite challenging, like what Laura was saying, you know, it can be really tough, you know, to be kind of just seeing the same, you know, number of faces and that kind of thing, and I suppose tension does run high, and it's only normal that would happen. So, you know, my old thought is being the good enough parent is good enough. You don't have to be super mom or super dad or super partner, whatever. You know, just being good enough, you know, is enough, I think. I wasn't baking any cakes or anything like that during lockdown, you know, like a lot of other people were. But
no banana bread, Jules, no.
No, none. Not even a cupcake. But yeah. But we survived.
I think that we survived, and we can face a lot more after this, and I suppose there's lots of learning for us, but I'm sure for the experts that's here, our families and parents, they know a lot more about, and they've come through a lot to into the future.
Yeah, so I suppose just to say a big thank you to Catherine for doing the sign language. It's really, really helpful. And even if parents are kind of watching this now, if you know any other parent who you think might benefit from watching the presentation or the webinar, be sure to mention it. It'll be on Jigsaw Online. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I hope it was helpful in some way.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a very different part of our work, so it's a real privilege to do it. So thank you. It's not often we get an audience of however many people, so thank you for joining in. And thank you, Catherine. That's a great of you. I think that is us. Okay, if people could complete the questionnaire at the end, that would be really great. Every feedback is really helpful, so we can improve what we're doing and learn from it as well. So So thank you very much.
Thank you.